All right, I think I got it set up right. Okay, so I chose to do chapter 5, and it is over executive function disorder. What is executive function disorder? Executive function refers to cognitive skills that can affect organization and regulation. So, whenever you hear the word cognitive, it usually goes towards thinking about the brain and neurological. And so, this is brain associated and it helps carry out specific skills and tasks. It can be linked to disease or damage to the frontal lobe, and it's also been proven to be possibly genetic. So the frontal lobe, we know that it controls voluntary responses. So it's responses that are usually associated with running, writing a paper, and executive functions, which is where executive function disorder gets the name from. This disorder is known to interfere with the following skills, such as problem solving, self recognition, decision making, and the ability to concentrate on relevant sensory information. What does executive function disorder look like? So, it's a system controlling multiple things at once. So, it's a system and it's not about learning just shapes or colors. So, an example of this is a student struggling to complete certain tasks. This leads to the student becoming frustrated, and they struggle with directions, usually steps and cues. So, how can this look like in a classroom setting? So, an example that was in the chapter is a student being able to remember homework assignment. So, a teacher could say on a Tuesday in class that there is a homework assignment due on that Friday. While normally a student would write down the due date being on Friday, for example, a student with EF might not write it down, and even if they did, they would forget to look at it. So that is a sign of a student that struggles with executive function disorder. So, what are the main signs and symptoms seen? So, a survey was taken by parents and teachers, and they observed struggling in these areas: multitasking, motivation, completing assignments, juggling deadlines, remembering and applying information, and shifting from one activity to the next. So, motivation and multitasking are the two main struggles in EF. So, it's important for us to recognize these signs and symptoms as we can advocate for a student who might be seen to be frustrated. And sometimes I feel as if I have a little brother that is in elementary school and he has ADHD. I know that it's a different disorder, but for the longest time, he had a teacher that was like, oh, he's just immature. He's just a kid. That's why he's not doing good in his reading assignments or anything like that. But we talked to someone else at the school, and it was like, it's so apparent that he has ADHD. It's not that he's immature or anything like that. It's him having ADHD. So we were able to get him help and diagnose him with ADHD. And once we assessed that situation, he got better at performing tasks in school. So I feel with that being said, it's important to be able to observe the signs and symptoms to where we can advocate for our students to direct them to a certain path to where we can help them, whether it be how we construct our classroom or how we can get them medical help, such as, taking certain medications or anything like that. So, how do we as teachers help students with EF disorder? So, we as educators have to work with the student. With that being said, we have to work with the student by making sure they are completing all their assignments and that they are doing each step correctly and not getting overwhelmed, because that is a common thing seen with EF disorder. Another thing that can help is to communicate with the family. So with that, something that is done with my little brother, and I guess I can reference him a lot because he's still in school, is that they send home a binder with him, and each week it lays out what homework is due the following day. It kind of gives the family a layout of what needs to be completed at home and make sure they are on task. And I feel especially for students with EF need this extra attention. So maybe a more individual communication, such as I know a lot of teachers now do the Remind Me app to where you can message a parent directly or email them and maybe have a layout of each day that this student needs to complete this food web activity before class on Tuesday, and maybe give the parents a layout, because you got to understand too, the parents are probably overwhelmed with making sure that their child is getting the proper attention and help that they can get. And they're not teachers, we're the teachers, so if we can help them in any way, we need to be able to do that. So also, with that being said, it's important to construct assignments to fit all students. So it's good to make sure your assignments are not going to be overwhelming to where it's so much to do in a class period. Maybe do a long-term assignment to where they have a lot of time to complete one particular activity. Another thing is to have a checkoff sheet and schedule for assignments. That kind of follows with what I said about the family, maybe sending home something with things to do every night or every day in class, or with a particular assignment such as a project, going step by step of what needs to be completed. Other ways to help a student with EF disorder. So it is important to set goals, and this helps encourage students to complete certain tasks. So like I said in the previous slide, doing a weekly schedule will really help a student. I know that it helps me being in college, being able to have a layout of what needs to be completed each week, and make sure I get everything completed and not to procrastinate certain things. So an example of that is to maybe have a weekly layout of assignments that are due a particular day. So you could give them an assignment, a weekly schedule on Monday, and it has what is going to be done in class every day, and highlight that in yellow, and then homework be in pink, telling them what needs to be done at home. So giving them that schedule to keep them on track would really help. So offer organization models. So in the paper, it talks about how students with EF disorder can often get really distracted at times. So it's important to try to navigate the student away from being distracted. So they said not to isolate students or put them by a door or a window to where they can get distracted while looking at assignments. And rather than that, to put the student next to a couple other students completing the same activity to where they can model the student. So, and another thing is to break down certain assignments. So whenever you get an assignment and it feels like it's the same thing and it's taken over an hour, it's going to be really hard to complete it. So breaking down the assignment into multiple sections can help with the student being able to retain information and to not get distracted. So another thing is to promote attention and retention. So this involves getting the students involved in activities, and something that was said in the chapter was an example that I really liked, and I had to use it, was to get the students involved by getting them to model the solar system, getting 8 students lined up and to model each planet in order. Because honestly, we all know that it's really hard, even just for me, being a college student, to sit in a lecture that's an hour and 15 minutes and not get distracted or to doze off or anything like that. So getting them up out of their seats kind of, gets the blood flowing, actually gets them involved, and helps them being able to retain information better. Lastly, to monitor behaviors and to make sure the student is on task. So this involves checking in with the student. So whenever you are doing an assignment, walking around the room and making sure the student is completing a certain activity right, making sure they don't have any questions, making sure they're not lost. And another thing is to make sure the student is organized. A big thing with EF disorder is that students have the tendency to be disorganized. And so usually they won't have they have their backpack a mess, they don't have their schedule right. So making sure the student is organized. And reading that kind of reminded me of a saying that I've heard before, is called cluttered space, cluttered mind. So if you see a student maybe having a cluttered space, you know that they're probably not on task, and it's good for us to come in and try to help them out with getting reorganized. So what to take away from EF disorders as an educator? I think it's important for teachers to recognize the ways that we can help students with disabilities. So, like I said before, we need to advocate for our students. We don't need to try to push it off on them being immature or acting out. I'm not saying that every educator does this, but with my little brother, I know that that was pushed off on him, and I know that it has been done before with his friends and their parents talking to my mom and me about it. And we have to advocate for our students and try to figure out a way to navigate around their disability. And I hate the word disability because it sounds like they're disability you think not able to. Doesn't mean that they're not able to complete a certain thing. You just have to re-navigate around it to complete a certain task. So with that being said, we need to find different approaches and find what they struggle with and try a different approach. And a good thing is to communicate and work with parents, because the sad thing is too, and I say the sad thing, if you think about it, as educators, we spend more time with our students than they do their own parents. And whenever they're away from us, then they're with their family and they're trying to work on assignments. So it's important to work with the parents and make sure the student is on task. So that is my presentation, and thank you so much.